The company that once promised to put a computer in every home was now burning cash, losing market share, and running out of time. Analysts had written it off. Competitors were circling. Inside the company, confusion had replaced clarity. Apple wasn't just struggling, it was drifting toward irrelevance. Throughout the early and mid-1990s, Apple made mistake after mistake. Its product lineup had become a maze of nearly identical computers with different names, different configurations, and no clear reason to exist. Customers were confused, developers were frustrated. Meanwhile, Microsoft's Windows operating system was becoming the global standard, and cheaper PC manufacturers were flooding the market. Apple's premium pricing no longer felt justified. The company was losing hundreds of millions of dollars. Morale was collapsing. Ironically, the man who had once defined Apple's identity was gone. Steve Jobs, the co-founder, had been forced out in 1985 after a power struggle. Without his obsessive focus and relentless product discipline, Apple slowly lost its sense of direction. Leadership changed, strategies shifted, nothing stuck. By 1996, bankruptcy was no longer a distant possibility. It was a near certainty. Desperate, Apple made a bold decision. In 1997, it acquired a company called Next. That deal brought Steve Jobs back into the building, initially as an advisor. Within months, he became interim CEO, and almost immediately, he did something radical. He started cutting. Jobs looked at Apple's bloated product grid and slashed it down to 4 core products: a consumer desktop, a consumer laptop, a professional desktop, a professional laptop. That was it. Dozens of side projects were canceled, teams were dissolved, resources were reallocated. It was painful, but it created something Apple hadn't had in years: focus. Jobs believed that focus meant saying no to 1,000 things. Apple would no longer try to compete everywhere. It would build a few great products and make them exceptional. In 1998, the first major result of that philosophy appeared: the iMac. At a time when most computers were beige, boxy, and boring, the iMac was colorful, translucent, and bold. It looked friendly. It looked different. It didn't just function well, it made a statement, and it sold. The iMac restored profitability and, more importantly, restored confidence. But the real transformation was just beginning. Jobs understood something deeper about technology. People didn't just want hardware, they wanted an experience. In 2001, Apple introduced the iPod, a small device that could hold 1,000 songs in your pocket. That alone was impressive, but the real genius was iTunes, the software that made organizing and buying music simple. Apple wasn't selling a music player, it was selling a seamless system. Control became the strategy. Apple would control the hardware, control the software, control the distribution. Every detail mattered. From packaging to interface design, nothing was accidental. The company became obsessed with integration, and that integration created loyalty. Then came 2007. When Steve Jobs walked onto the stage to introduce the iPhone, most people thought Apple was entering a crowded, competitive phone market. What they didn't realize was that Apple wasn't trying to build a better phone, it was redefining what a phone could be. A touchscreen interface, a full web browser, a device that combined music, communication, and computing into one object. The iPhone didn't just succeed, it reshaped entire industries. Telecommunications, software, media, photography, everything shifted. And with the App Store launch in 2008, Apple created an ecosystem that locked users in. Developers built applications, customers invested time and data. Switching became inconvenient, loyalty deepened. By the early 2010s, Apple was no longer fighting for survival, it was dominating. Its profit margins were among the highest in the industry. While competitors chased market share, Apple chased margin and brand power. It didn't aim to be the cheapest, it aimed to be the most desirable. This strategy wasn't without risk. Premium pricing meant expectations were high. every product launch had to feel revolutionary. The brand had to maintain its aura of innovation. When Steve Jobs passed away in 2011, many predicted the magic would fade, but Apple had institutionalized its discipline. Tim Cook expanded the supply chain efficiency, increased services revenue, and strengthened Apple's ecosystem. Services became the next evolution: Apple Music, iCloud, the App Store, Apple Pay. Recurring revenue layered on top of hardware sales. The company was no longer dependent on a single breakthrough device. It had built a recurring financial engine. And the numbers reflected it. Revenue climbed into the hundreds of billions of dollars. Cash reserves swelled. Investors who once doubted Apple now saw it as one of the safest large-cap companies in the world. In 2018, Apple became the first publicly traded U.S. company to reach a $1 trillion market capitalization, then $2 trillion, then $3 trillion. From 90 days away from collapse to a $3 trillion empire. But the real story isn't just about products, it's about strategic clarity. Apple learned that survival doesn't come from doing more, it comes from doing less better. It learned that brand perception can justify premium pricing. It learned that integration can create defensibility. Apple didn't win by being everywhere, it won by being deliberate. At its lowest point, the company faced a brutal truth. It had lost its identity. The turnaround began the moment it rediscovered it. Focus, simplicity, design, control. Today, when customers line up for the latest iPhone or MacBook, they're not just buying hardware, they're buying into an ecosystem built over decades. They're buying reliability, status, consistency. The near bankruptcy of 1997 forced Apple to confront its weaknesses. Without that crisis, the reinvention may never have happened. Sometimes collapse creates clarity. Apple's story is not a fairy tale. It's a case study in disciplined strategy, ruthless prioritization, and long-term ecosystem thinking. It shows how a company can fall, adapt, and rise stronger, not by chasing trends, but by defining them. From chaos to control, from irrelevance to dominance, from near extinction to one of the most valuable companies in human history. That is what happened behind the billions.